Right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Housing and Neighbourhoods Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Thank you for understanding that we've moved it online at the last minute, but given what happened at last week's council meeting and the fact that two of our members are shielding, I thought it was the easiest way to involve everybody, and we have no formal decisions to make today. So hopefully you're all happy with that. So item one is notice of recording. I advise the meeting to note that this meeting will be webcast for live or subsequent broadcast via the council's meeting site, and that members of the press public may record and take photos except where there are confidential or exempt items. Item two, we have no apologies. Item of interests. Members are reminded that they must declare all relevant pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests arising from any business to be discussed at this meeting. If a disclosable pecuniary interest is declared, a member must not speak or take part in that agenda item. Any declarations will be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. So item 4 is the action notes and action tracker. This will be just for noting and discussion today. And we'll formally agree them at the next meeting. Has anybody got any questions on the action notes and action tracker? No? No? Okay, we'll move on. Item 5 then is Councillor Shabana Hussain has kindly agreed to join us. Welcome, Shabana. Are you there? Hello.
Yeah, just took me a second. Just took me a second to get the camera on and the mute on. Right. So thank you ever so much. It's nice to be at the committee. It's one of my favourite committees. Am I allowed to say that?
Well, you are now.
Well, yes, thank you. So yeah, so thank you so much for inviting me today. That's
all right. I was just going to explain to members. What we've invited you for and what the remit is, if that's all right. So obviously, Shabana's our new housing cabinet member, housing and neighbourhoods cabinet member, and we thought it would be a really good opportunity just to hear from you directly what your priorities are. This isn't a formal session where we're going to come back in 3 months and say, well, you said, therefore why. But it's more of an opportunity for us to discuss which direction you think we need to go in, and also where scrutiny can help you. So it's just more of an introduction. What do you want to achieve? How can we help? And I'll pass it over to you now.
Right, okay, so thank you so much for inviting me. It's a privilege to be on this committee. Obviously, since I've been in this role since August, I've had the pleasure of meeting all the hardworking staff, both in City Housing and City Operation Directors, who have been working alongside to deliver my priorities, which I've set out in my report today, and I'm sure you've all read them. As previously committed, it's a privilege to be appointed as Cabinet Member for Homes and Neighbourhoods, to build on from Councillor Thompson's legacy in this role. Although there have been a number of changes in the portfolio, I will still be continuing to working with Councillor Thompson to address a number of these issues and challenges, such as the affordable housing, which impacts the families and lives of individuals across our city. Lately in the meeting, you will obviously get an update on localisation, which is a key priority for the portfolio. The update will provide you a progress report on the delivery plans from working together in Birmingham neighbourhoods and Birmingham collaborative neighbourhood reports, which Chris and Karen will go through later. I've also had an update on previous actions, and I co-chaired my first meeting with Localisation Staff Chamber, the deep dive sessions, which has been established to provide an opportunity for directors to highlight areas which is good practice and existing localisation activities, as well as identifying and agreeing areas on the focus for the next 12 months, and which will contribute towards the council's ambition around localisation. There are a number of good examples shared, but I just want to highlight one issue, which was highlighted, that adult social care prevention and early intervention model by Professor Graham Beck's, the designing of their social care services to shift towards the strength-based citizens focus approach with local social workers around the area within neighbourhoods to connect the vulnerable residents with activities within their local neighbourhoods. And the aim of this was to enable our citizens to live healthy, happy, independent, whether in their own homes, neighbourhoods, and in their communities. This is also an approach which is being discussed to view being rolled out across the city as the part of the council's priority moving forward from crisis and prevention. And I'm sure you'll get an update provided to this committee at some point. There's also a report being put together which will summarise the findings of the Star Chamber deep dive sessions, and officers are now in place to arrange a follow-up session with directorates again, which will, once it's been completed, I will forward and update the committee. There are a number of key priorities which you've probably seen that I would like to deliver within the housing service. As a ward councillor, I'm aware of the casework that we all receive relating to housing repairs, maintenance, the lack of affordable housing, the options, the problems around poor quality exempt accommodation. I welcome the coordinating overview scrutiny committee inquiry into exempt accommodation. This is an area where we almost push central government for clarity and legislative changes to stop the growth of non-commissioned exempt sector, not only for the Birmingham but also nationally. I will be attending the session with officers tomorrow to explore the issues raised during the inquiry. Over the coming months, I particularly want to be more focused on improving the performance in the key areas of the housing management, including void turnaround times and the right to repair. Report will be going on performance, will be updated and presented to the committee on the 14th of October. I do know that in the coming months there will be a challenge for many tenants of private rented accommodation due to the eviction of the ban in May, the ending of furlough, the removal of the additional £20 per week to our tenants on universal credit by the end of this month. We have written to all our universal credit tenants asking them to get in touch with the council if they are having problems paying their rent. Earlier in the year, we've also wrote to all the services to help if they need any help with their rent, to all our social housing tenants, those that are rented private from private landlords, to seek early help and support if they had and any help with the eviction. We will also continue working with partners across the city to support going forward for our families. Like I said, this is a long list. I probably talked more than I should have, but you've all seen my priorities, and I'm optimistic that we can deliver all these priorities. So I think I've done enough talking. So, thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much for that. I'm going to invite members now to comment or ask any questions, if that's all right. Do members want to comment or ask any questions? I'm going to take you in the order you indicated. So I've got Councillor Wood to start with.
Hi, Shabrana. Welcome to the post. You've got a hard act to follow, but I'm sure you'll fill the shoes admirably. Thanks very much for providing us with a list, and certainly you've just given us a bit of an outline of what your priorities will be. The one thing that does strike me from, it's quite an extensive list of priorities, and there isn't a lot of 2021 left, and there's only 4 months or 3 months of 22. So it's a rather ambitious list of things that you're going to achieve, or you're expecting the officers to achieve within sort of 6 months. That would be my first sort of general observation. I mean, picking up on a couple of things that you just mentioned in particular, certainly we all share the concerns about what might happen with regards to the ending of furlough and the effects on universal credit. However, I do note from the notes that initially we thought that the damage would be a lot higher than we thought at the beginning, and we changed the budget. We noticed that the budget for arrears was increased to 4.1 million, and it's not reached anywhere near that. So hopefully, through officers' hard work and managing of our tenants, the effects won't be as bad as the potentially the doom and gloom that we might expect. And I'd openly hope that that is the case. It is a bit of an unknown, certainly within the private rented sector, is what the effects are going to be. So I take that on board. So let's hope we can manage it properly. As I said to you earlier, the programme, if you're going to achieve all these things in 6 months, I would certainly hope that officers have provided you with a programme with milestones through to completion. And if they have, or if they haven't, I would strongly suggest that they do. And if they have, it might be nice if you could share that with us at some stage. Yeah, just to highlight the high level of ambition that you've got. We noticed that one of the things that you will hope to have established is an affordable housing delivery board. I wouldn't mind knowing who's going to be invited to join that board. Will there be cross-party representation? Will there be representation from outside the City Council, etc.? I'd like to know what the makeup of that advisory board would be, or that delivery board. And obviously, one of the other ones that other members of scrutiny will fully know from my own experience and my own interest is I've got serious concerns over the voids. Not so much in the length of time it's taken them to get ready, but I'm really concerned about the standard of which we expect tenants to accept voids. I've got a real deep concern that if we accept or we expect tenants to accept substandard voids, how can we expect them to look after them? So I'm pleased that is one of the things that you've highlighted. But apart from that, welcome on board. I look forward to getting some one-to-ones with you in the diary. We did have some really good sessions with Councillor Thompson beforehand, so hopefully we'll be able to carry that on with yourself.
Thank you. I don't know if you want to comment at that point, Councillor Hussain.
I'll just be very brief. Yes, I will welcome the one-to-ones, Councillor Wood. I haven't actually seen the whole programme. When I spoke to the officers, when I met the team, I told them what my issues are. I heard what they've all got to say, and I'm quite hopeful. I'm really optimistic that we will achieve these goals. I will, like I said, if I haven't got one, I haven't got a milestone just yet, but I will get one up for each services that I've actually asked for. Yeah, furlough, you touched upon furlough, and we don't really know what to expect. We have sent out letters to the tenants asking them, do they still have a job? Have the hours been cut back? Do they need support? So we've got a bit of a rough idea what to expect, but we wouldn't know the full impact until it actually happens. But we do have a bit of a backup plan, so hopefully it shouldn't be too disruptive. I think I answered everything that you did say. Yes, void is one of my main concerns as well. I haven't actually seen. I'm going to be going out probably in a couple of weeks' time with and having a look at the state of our voids, how long it is. So I'm hoping to get something more of an up-to-date standard of these properties, and hopefully we can change the performance on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Just by way of an update, Councillor Hussain, scrutiny are also having a look at voids at the moment. And when we get to the end of our agenda, we're going to be talking in our work programme about exactly the same visits. We're going to go and have a look at a void as we receive it, and then a void as we expect a tenant to take it on. So hopefully we'll be able to give you some constructive committee feedback on that process as well. Did you want to come back, Councillor Wood?
Yeah, just a quick one. One of the other questions was with regards to the Affordable Housing Delivery Board and what the makeup of that board would be.
Right. Can I just bring in Guy, because he's just put his hand up?
Yeah, it was just on. Is that okay, Chair?
Yes, by all means.
Yeah, no, just on that. I was going to come in on that point. So, firstly, just in terms of how all of the priorities are going to be brought together, a lot of these pieces of work are in train at the moment. and wrapped around all of the kind of transformational piece, we do have a kind of a program board. So we have, you know, quite sort of tight governance wrapped around the delivery. Some of these items, as well, you're probably aware, sit within the council's delivery plan and are monitored also through the existing performance framework. But if we can get something, a simplified version of the sort of program plan and milestones out to you, that will probably be helpful for you to give some assurance around that. Just in terms of the housing delivery board, that we are looking to get that set up initially as an officer group, and potentially bring in partners in Birmingham Social Housing Partnership as well, who sit alongside us on the Strategic Housing Birmingham Partnership, and that's just to initially explore, you know, future models and future options for increasing that delivery of affordable housing, which, as you know, is critical to the city. So initially it will be not just within housing, obviously within inclusive growth and colleagues in development and planning, and obviously finance, but also bring in some of our registered provider partners as well initially. No terms of reference being developed yet, but clearly the priority is to get some kind of formal governance wrapped around that delivery in place as soon as possible.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.
If there's nothing else, I'll move on, if that's okay, Councillor Wood. Councillor Locke was next.
Well, welcome to you, Role, Shabrana, and nice to see you. Or even though it's virtually, I'm keen on the voice too, and also repairs and sometimes the length of time that it takes for repairs to be done, because that can sometimes take ages. You know, if people are waiting to move into an empty property, and it can take ages. I've got a case in my case file, and it's going to take weeks before she can move in, and it is, you know, it does take a long time, and that's could be you know, she's waiting for a home. Also, another thing for me is people who wish to downsize, and you know, it frees up then maybe a 2-3 bedroomed house. You know, they obviously it's their own choice to do that, but you know, looking at something you know, so that we can get better figures of, you know, the amount of properties, and it could be saving on bed and breakfast or temporary accommodation. And thirdly, you mentioned, you know, working with growing vets and, you know, people remaining in their homes for longer and happier at home. I hope, I know along with growing vets, you consider also the carers who are looking after them, and the support and help they may need as well, because it is a full-time job being a carer. So, you know, to take them into consideration. That's it.
By all means, come back, Councillor Hussain.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. Do you want to take a few more, or do you want to just take one by one?
No, we're all right for time at the moment, so I'll take them one at a time unless we get short on time, because there's quite a few points from everyone, so I don't want to leave you with a whole list.
That's fine, and work my word through them. Okay, repairs, like I did say, that is a bit of an issue, so we are going to be looking at that and get people into our properties as quickly as fast as we can, because it's not fair just to have a void property sitting there. So that is, like I did say, it is my priority. And like working with Professor Graham Betts is getting people to enjoy their homes. Okay, and I know it's kind of, as you know, with you being a carer, we want people to enjoy their time in their own home and be comfortable and be safe. And if we can support them in any way we can, that's fine. The point that you touched upon on downsize, I haven't really had much. I haven't really looked into a bit more of that. So maybe if Guy wants to touch upon that, I don't know, but I've not really looked much into downsizing, but I will look into that a bit more in detail. Guy?
Yeah.
Sorry, Chair.
Yeah, so we do currently have a sort of a downsizing program, albeit agree, you know, it's something we need to keep the foot on the gas, so to speak. So we've got financial support in place for those wanting to downsize, so they don't have to incur costs around removals and fixtures and fittings and stuff. And the sort of program of properties that we've got, looking to align it to those families that are in temporary accommodation. So yeah, we'll make sure that, you know, you're kept updated with progress around that. I will say as well, that's not just for our stock. So we are as well working with our housing association partners around that approach as well. So if they can release family accommodation as well as us, because we're not the only providers of social housing. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. One of the things that strikes me about that, actually, I'm not asking for a detailed answer now, it's more just to put on your very long list of things. Mary reminded me, one of the issues that we might have, and I don't know if we've got a policy about this, often a carer who's been living with somebody may not be on a tenancy, so that then has a knock-on impact if that person goes into long-term care or sadly passes. Do we have a responsibility to that carer? And do we have a carer's policy within it? It might just be something for future to look at. If there's nothing else, Mary.
That's a good point you raised, Chair. Thank you. No more questions from me.
Thank you. Councillor Bridle's next.
Hello, Councillor Hussain. Nice to see you here. Try and turn this camera on, although for some reason it's a bit difficult. Right. Yeah, I wanted to ask about on housing, what's going to happen about the former modernisation programme that we had? I mean, there's stuff in your report about retrofitting and so on. All this stuff's very important, sprinklers and so on. But what about, there are still people, I think, who don't have modern kitchens and bathrooms. What are we going to do about that? And is this a case of, I don't know, lobbying the government or whatever? So I'm just interested to know about that particular issue. Secondly, I want to know, are you definitely staying for the localisation discussion later on the agenda? Because I'm glad you are, that's good, just checking. And I wanted to say on that, I'm glad that, you know, you flagged that up as one of your key priorities. And also glad to hear you talking about working closely with Graham Betts. I dropped into, you know, the chief executives do sort of webinars, or well, yeah, they talk to the staff, and I dropped into one last Friday and heard him speaking. And I find him very inspiring because he very much is on this local agenda. And so I'm really glad you're working with him. And I think he's really keen on the idea of more power to residents and, you know, getting people to do things for themselves and preventing people obviously having to access services at the last minute. So just to mention that. And just on localisation, 2 points. We are, in my ward, a pioneer place. So we're one of the pioneer projects that's listed in your report at the end of this agenda. And I wondered if I could persuade you to have a look at the video that we made. It was made by the resident who chairs one of our residents groups, and she explained some of the challenges of the localisation work at ward level and, you know, what needs sorting out still. So it's not very long, it's only about 2 minutes long. And it's Glebe Farm and Tar Cross Pioneer Place. And I would just urge you to have a look at it, along with, and I'm sure Karen, who I think is Karen here, and will say something later on, also urge you to have a look at, a few of us, I think, have submitted challenge case studies. So things that are challenges still with residents working with the council. And again, I'd say that maybe some of those are worth having a quick look at, because that'll help, hopefully, with an understanding of where some of us, you know, on Pioneer Places group feel that localisation has got to. So I wanted to mention those 2 things. Thanks, Councillor Holbrook. That was it. Yeah, thank you.
No problem. Can I ask a favour? Either Marge or Karen, whoever's best placed to do it, would you send that link or that video to all of the members of scrutiny as well, so that we can all have a look at it? And
Yeah.
any case studies you've got would be helpful as well, Marge.
Yes, well, Karen Cheney has got them all. And yes, I mean, I'm sure that would be possible. I didn't want to overwhelm Councillor Hussain with all the stuff, because I'm sure she's got a lot on her plate. But even if she could look at a couple of them, that would be wonderful. I think it would really help give an insight into where some of us feel like, you know, there's still progress to be made, but you know, we're getting along.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you.
That's a good idea. Thank you.
Yeah, I have seen the video, but I had some problems with the volume, so I did watch it, but I couldn't hear it. I've not seen the case studies just yet, and I'm just going to ask Guy about the modernisation that you talked about. I have had it, but I can't remember what the answer was. Sorry.
Hi, yeah. So yeah, we still do have an existing investment program based around replacing things like kitchen and bathrooms based on end of life cycle. Clearly, however, there's lots of increasing competing pressures on the investment program. Things like the introduction of increased fire and building safety measures, and obviously the route to zero and retrofit requirements to achieve route to zero, which we're looking to try and do. You know, at the moment, primarily that's been delivered through government grants, which we are accessing to deliver some of that work. But clearly, the ongoing and in the future, there is going to be a need to look at our overall investment programme to make sure that we can effectively balance between normal investment requirements, if you like your kitchens and bathrooms, and some of those additional pressures around fire building safety and retrofit. So I don't have sort of day-to-day operational control over the investment programme, but can assure you that we do still have an investment programme based around those things.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Harmer.
Thank you, Penny. So first of all, I would echo Councillor Wood's comments about this being an ambitious programme, which is great, and it's great that you in starting out, and congratulations on your new post, but that you start out in that context. But it's very much about having a deliverable route to getting there. So as time goes on, it will be good for both for us as a scrutiny committee to track it, and I think as Councillor Wood said, having milestones along the way. Councillor Wood also mentioned one-to-ones. I mean, I don't know whether he has separate one-to-ones, but him, myself, and Councillor Thompson had good cross-party meetings, which were very helpful and I think productive from all points of view. So I'm certainly looking forward to sharing those with yourself and Councillor Wood once we can get them in the diary. In terms of specific points, I think the first thing I would say is I've got a great concern at the moment about casework, housing casework. Now, to an extent, this is an towards scrutiny issue in terms of the casework system, but within my casework, I don't know if this is the same for other members of the committee, but the housing ones stand out as the most overdue. I've got a meeting with Wendy Griffiths shortly to discuss how the new system is working or not working and I had 14 well overdue housing bits of casework when I sort of did a totting up of the system, and I had one specific case that I forwarded to her, which was overdue since I think May. When I sent it to her, you know, 2 days later, I get a call from a resident. Oh, it's been sorted. Fantastic. I actually, you know, which shows that it could have been done. I actually met the housing officer we had our first in-person housing liaison board meeting this week, and I met him. He said, "Oh, you know that the casework?" I said, "Oh yeah." He said, "Well, I got a message from it last week. It's the first I'd heard of it. No one had been. It's my job to do that. No one had told me about it." He said, "Why you have to go through this system, I don't know. Just tell me. Don't go through the system. Tell me." Now, you know, there we are being told you must go through the system so we can log it and track it. And then we've got council officers saying that's a waste of time. Come to us direct. So I know that's primarily in terms of scrutiny, that's primarily a co-ord issue, but it does stand out most starkly in terms of housing, in terms of my casework load. And there is an issue there that I think goes beyond the system. Another of my concerns at the moment, I think, just to flag up with you, I don't necessarily great answers at this point so early in your time, is the care for residents in temporary accommodation. And we go through all the issues and reasons why they're in temporary accommodation, but it seems pretty inevitable that we're going to have thousands of residents in temporary accommodation for quite a while. Now, where they're in purpose-built temporary accommodation, like in my ward, Bushmere House, having been around there, I get the sense they are looked after pretty well, and you have support workers coming in offering support. My concern is the ones who are not in such accommodation, and often come to me saying, you know, nobody's been in touch with us. The accommodation, fine, it's a roof over the head, but we don't get that support, we don't get that help. And I think we need to consider as a council how we can provide that sort of support to people that they get if they're in places like Bushmere House, but they don't get if they're in hotels or wherever else they're put when as the system gets overwhelmed. And finally, I also wanted to flag up something that's been to this committee several times, which is the issue of the private rented sector. And the particular concern there is that when mandatory licensing came in for all large HMOs, the council got quite a significant chunk of extra income from that licensing, but took ages and ages, literally years, to recruit the extra staff to actually do the work that licensing is supposed to fund, in terms of environmental health officers or whatever who are working in that team. I think it's very important that with all the pressure on the private rented sector, and particularly HMOs and exempt, we've had a little bit of a helping hand in the short term with the exempt pilot that's provided some temporary staff, but those will no doubt be going soon. And we need to make sure that our HMO license funded complement is fully in place, and that we're not waiting to recruit any of those. So I'd welcome a check that we have actually now finally got there on that, and that's me done. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Hussain.
Right, okay. Sorry, thank you, Chair. Roger, I'm going to say a few things, and I'm going to bring Guy in a minute. You touched upon the support for residents or our citizens in temporary accommodation. Because of the portfolio that's split, that falls under Councillor Thompson, but I will liaise with her on that. You touched upon private rented scheme. We have got more staff in. We've got a process in place, and the backlog of HMO licensings and everything. We should be, I think, is it, Guy, am I correct? Is it September? Sorry, October and November time, we should hopefully get rid of all the backlog, and we should be in place. Guy, can I bring you in? Is that all right, Chair?
I think that's what Sir Jean had mentioned the other day, because with the changes, the PRS work has moved into city operations, but clearly reports through to Councillor Hussain. So yeah, there is some additional staff that's being brought in to make sure any backlogs are cleared. Certainly by the end of the calendar year. Yeah.
Okay, because that was going to be thanks for that. That was going to be one of my questions, is actually are we doing a study as to how useful the exempt accommodation team have been, and if so, are we putting together a bid to mainstream the budget because certainly from my point of view, it's been extremely useful. And I would argue that there's a case to be made to mainstream it in terms of overall savings offset against social care and things like that.
Do you want me to come in there, Councillor Sainz? So yes is the answer to the question. So clearly the pilot has enabled us to put in place some on the ground resources to do that sort of inspection and oversight work, and at scrutiny tomorrow we'll be presenting quite a lot of detail around what that has actually delivered. We have got some carryover funding up until March so that we can continue some of the inspection work, so that we've still got resources there to respond to issues. And during that time we will be developing a business case which will set out what we feel, you know, a team should look like moving forward. However, that's at the same time as continuing to talk to government and MHCRG about, you know, what they can do in terms of carrying on some degree of support, because at the moment the whole of the exempt sector, as you know, is non-commissioned and it's funded through housing benefit via the DWP, so that the council doesn't get any government funding as such to do any of that additional oversight work. So we will be continuing to push that.
And that's fine. And just one other thing before I apologise to Councillor Harmer for stealing his question. Can we, Jane and Kerry, can we liaise with the operations team and get an update on what the recruitment in the PRS team looks like? Because they're two separate teams. And Councillor Harmer is absolutely right. It's taken a good couple of years to recruit into that PRS team. So can we just get an update for scrutiny committee, please? That doesn't need to be a political thing. That's just an officer update for the committee to share what that recruitment now looks like. Is there anything else you wanted to add, Councillor Harmer? Because I interrupted you.
Just one final quick thing. We have been several times promised updates on the listings of HMOs and exempt properties, and it hasn't been forthcoming. So I guess that's almost perhaps more of a question for Guy. But unless I've missed it in the plethora of emails we get these days, my listing is now almost, I think, a year, certainly getting on for a year old. And I do refer to it quite often when residents come to me and say, what's going on in this property? It's really helpful to have an up-to-date list. So could that listing be updated, please? Okay.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor. Oh, sorry, Guy.
Yeah, no, just say, yeah, that's fine, because I know, has it been a year since this thing? That's gone quickly, that has. So yeah, I'll make sure I get a refreshed data set out to you, and obviously other members as well.
That would be helpful. Was there anything you wanted to add, Councillor Hussain, before I move on to the next person? Thank you so much. Councillor Sharp.
Thanks, Chair. Just a very quick couple of questions, please. I'm a bit concerned about this board that's been set up just amongst officers and people from outside, when there's going to be no elected members on there from the council. Because we are the ones at the end of the day who carry the can. And I think we should have some elected members sitting on that board. The other thing that confuses me and confuses other people, when we talk about affordable homes compared to rented homes, there is a difference. We continuously go on about affordable homes, but the term rented home or social housing, whatever you want to choose to call it, has now disappeared off the radar. Thanks, Chair.
No problem. Councillor Hussain.
Thanks, Mike and Councillor Sharp. Can I just bring in Guy into that one?
Yeah, just so to the delivery board, it's through discussions with colleagues in housing development who are obviously oversee the Birmingham Municipal Housing Trust work. It's just that, you know, that initial board to sort of map out options for the future at a point in time. It will definitely, you know, I agree, require member input, certainly where decisions need to be made. So very much exploratory at the moment, and we develop terms of reference, but I'll take your comments back around that. And you're absolutely right to highlight the difference between social rent and affordable rent. because sometimes affordable rent isn't affordable for some people, and we add our sort of requirement, if you like, and need in the city is for social rent. Hence the reason to look at how can we look at delivery models that deliver social rent as well as affordable rent, as well as market rent, etc. But yes, totally take your point that the need in Birmingham is for social rented family homes.
Thanks, Guy.
Okay. Thank you. I'll move on to Councillor Mahmood Hussain now.
Thank you, Chair. Congratulations, Shabana. The question I'm going to ask is around housing. Actually, is some of the residents or some of our constituents been put into this temporary accommodation, and they're stuck in that temporary accommodation for years, and they cannot even renovate their property because they're knowingly that they will soon be moving out of that. So what sort of plans do you have for that?
Right. Thank you, Councillor Hussain. Back to the original question about temporary accommodations, that's moved over onto Councillor Thompson's portfolio because obviously the changes of the portfolio. So that one we'll have to raise with her. But what I can do is I can get in touch with Councillor Thompson and get back to you on that one.
Thank you. That's really helpful. I don't think. Sorry, I'm flicking between different bits on here. I don't think I've got anything else. I've only got one question, but it might actually sit with Councillor Thompson, so I'll take your advice on it. Actually, I tell a lie, I've got two questions. The first one is, what work are we doing around mapping the impact exempt property providers closing down is going to have? Because I'm a bit worried we're going to end up with a massive influx of homelessness. If a provider shuts down and we don't find somebody else to take it over, or the city council isn't able to take that provider over, where are we with that? And if that sits with Councillor Thompson, I'm more than happy to refer it to there. And the final one is, are we doing any work about the potential energy increases to our tenants? Because a lot of our tenants still live, particularly our tenants in flats and tower blocks, still live with outdated heating systems. And obviously everybody's aware at the moment that we're going to, I hesitate to use the word crisis, but obviously energy prices are increasing significantly. And I worry that those are our tenants that are most vulnerable and are going to be hardest hit by it. So I'm just wondering if we're doing any preliminary work around how we might be able to assist with that.
Thank you for your questions. Right, I'll go back. I'll do the energy efficiency one first, and I'll bring Guy in. The energy efficient one, we've had some funding, so we are going around, and especially our social housing tenants, we are providing them with a free boiler cavity installation to reduce their bills. We've also got some different types of funding to reduce the carbon emissions that we have. It's this time of year where all the energy bills are going up. We've got a couple of companies who have gone bust and being transferred onto a different provider. That if you've got a fixed contract on your energy bills and you've been transferred to somebody else, your bills will probably go up. So it's a scary time at this time of year, and especially with winter just literally right around the corner. So it is quite scary. But we do have some support for our tenants if they need us, so they just can get in touch with us. You did talk about mapping out on the exempts. We've got a scrutiny report tomorrow. We'll find out more about from their findings tomorrow. Guy, have I missed anything else off?
No, I think you've mentioned that we've got the local authority delivery grant funding, and that's being very much evidence based in terms of targeting those most fuel poor properties and those that are in fuel poverty. And that's where we'll be targeting that work. And with the sort of recent issues around fuel prices, we're looking within our financial inclusion partnership and our financial inclusion team to see what work we can do, looking at where those impacts are and how we can direct some help and support in those areas. And on the exempt, I think the concern was around, the impact of providers coming out of the sector. and how that's being managed and the oversight around that, which we recognised going back when the first provider announced that, going back probably 10 months now. So as part of the pilot, again, that's allowed us to fund a piece of work developing what we're calling an exit protocol and toolkit, which sets out how the provider, the council, the regulator works to ensure that individuals impacted by a provider closing down or coming out of the sector, how that is well managed, so that we know where people are being moved to, that we're working with other providers to manage that process. So it is something we've recognised, and we've got a toolkit which is just about to be completed now, which will sit within our sort of future supported housing strategy.
Okay, that's great. And can I assume that toolkit, when it's complete, will come to us for a look at scrutiny, if that's okay? Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much. If there's nothing further from members, I'll move on to the next item. And just to say thank you for that, Councillor Shabrana Hussain. I've just realised I've got two of you back on the committee right now, so I've got to be specific which Councillor Hussain I'm referring to. We really appreciate that, and we really appreciate your openness as well about where we're going, how much work has already been done, and what your priorities are in the future. And please don't ever feel you can't ask scrutiny to help out. We're more of a friendly committee, so we like to be able to do some of the task and finish work as opposed to just the challenge work. So, you know, please do feel free to use us as a resource as and when. I mean, obviously we have our own opinions.
Sorry, Chair, I was on the committee, so I do know what we were like when we were on the committee that day. So, yes, I would like to know a bit more about your void that you do with the piece that you will be doing in your void. So that'll be interesting to see.
That's great. I'll get Jane and Kerry to liaise with your team about what we're doing on that, and just get you a briefing note done on what we're doing. But I imagine it's pretty much the same that you're doing. So let's just tie up the two pieces of work rather than both go about it separately. Okay, in which case I'll move on to the localisation piece of work. I don't know if you want to open that up with a comment, Councillor Shabrana, or if you want me to hand it straight over to Chris and Karen.
Well, I'll just be very brief. I should stop talking. I'll be very brief. I do find that this localisation is going to be a key part of, not just for the housing and localisation stuff, but the whole part of the council as well. And we need to engage more with our residents and get everybody involved in this. So that's all I'm going to say. Thank you.
That's brilliant. Thank you. Would you like to give us your update, Chris and Karen, and then I'll open it to members?
Yes, of course. So I'll start and just give you some high-level bits from the paper that we wrote. Karen may then want to add some detail if she feels any details needed in any areas, and then of course we'll pick up any questions. So I did put in the chat, and I think most members heard me at the start, but apologies that I can't put on my camera. There's some technical issue that is not allowing me to do that needs an IT fix. So yeah, by way of introduction, just a reminder, in this paper at the start, I just make reference to, obviously after the dissolution of the district committees, there were a couple of policy papers that reset, if you like, the approach that we would take to localisation within the City Council. There was one in 2018, which was a broad framework, and then one in 2019 that I suppose is driving the majority of our work, which was working together in Birmingham's neighbourhoods. Don't intend to go through the list of things that paper set out that we would do. What we did do as a result of that was draw up a localisation delivery plan, which I've attached in at the bottom of the paper in Appendix 1, and I've identified the progress that we've made against each of the activities that we were seeking to deliver under that plan. So again, just a few broad highlights around that. First one being around the sort of wider ownership of localisation in terms of progress, if you like, over the last few months. So as the Cabinet member mentioned, the localisation star chambers have been established. We've had sessions with every directorate within the City Council, as well as the Children's Trust. They've come to those meetings, sharing the activity that they're undertaking that has a relevance to localisation, setting out whether or not there are further things they wish to do under that agenda, and then sort of some conclusions drawn as to what we would then pick up in the future meetings. And that's a summary of all of those meetings is just being written, that will then allow us to focus those next sessions. But I think it's fair to say there is a spread of ownership and contribution to the localisation agenda across services in the city. You know, you've heard about adults. We know that children's are moving in the direction of a much more localised approach, similar to the work that adults have been doing, and other areas are undertaking initiatives that are relevant, such as inclusive growth. And there's a bit more here about the community infrastructure levy and the work in East Birmingham, etc. So we will put all that together, and that will then inform the next stages of that localisation Star Chamber process. So that will be an ongoing process with the directorates, and will deliver greater buy-in across the city, and also greater understanding from people like myself as to what actually is going on across the city around this agenda. I made some reference to ward plans and how we've now got 54 of the 59 ward plans across the city. And again, in the more detailed programme of work, it talks about developing priorities across the remaining wards, so that at least groups can bid for funding under the various funding streams that have emerged, particularly the Commonwealth Games one. And again, we know with the Celebrating Communities pot of money that is now live within the ward process, and is embarking upon that sort of participatory decision-making process for round one, prior to then moving into round two of the Celebrating Communities Fund that's available through wards. There are a couple of other things I've mentioned around resources. So the work that has been done over a number of months around identifying ways in which we can utilise the local share of the community infrastructure levy within wards, that is reaching a conclusion in that the crowdfunding provider either has or is very imminently being awarded the contract to deliver that crowdfunding platform for us. And wards who have local community infrastructure levy funding, that's clearly not every ward, because it's only applicable to wards that have certain types of development. They will then be able to utilise that. There'll be a mechanism to utilise that resource to meet some of the priorities of their wards. So there's a couple of £1 million within that pot of money, so it's significant, although a large chunk of that does reside in one or two wards in the city where that development takes place. But I think the spread is now increased from 11 wards, I think, to 13 wards. And then more recently, procurement colleagues have launched a social value portal, which I believe is called Match My Project, whereby community organisations can, via the web, can identify the project they would like to see delivered, and then businesses in the city and those that contract with the city can then look to match themselves, if you like, against those projects. So there's now a mechanism to try and match the social value that businesses wish to deliver or contractually need to deliver against those community links, so community priorities. So I think that's another good area of growth in terms of the resources that are going into local places. The neighbourhood and parish council agenda continues to progress. Clearly, it progresses at the rate that those areas of the city that are interested in exploring parish councils, how fast they wish to take that. But we have now lined up our internal processes in support of any areas of the city that wish to go down the route of emparishment. So we've taken policy papers through Cabinet so that we know the mechanisms that we will go through for things like community governance reviews. That's all now set out. We're waiting an imminent decision on the bid that was put into central government to further develop support for areas of the city that want to develop neighbourhood planning in the formal planning sense of a neighbourhood plan. So again, that will be positive that there is then some more resource there to support those parts of the city that are going down that route, should the bid be successful. I made reference to some of the community capacity building work, and I suppose in particular the work that's being done around Celebrating Community Fund and trying to support groups who want to put in viable bids and how they might do that. And we've also identified some other resource as well that we can put into some community support, community capacity building support in the next 6 months or so. And then finally, I've made reference to the fact that we've now recruited 4 additional posts into the Neighbourhood Development and Support Unit. So that team, in terms of the community development and support officers, has grown from what was recently down to 2 up to 6. And those staff have as well as having an area basis for community support, also have a specialist lead function. So, for example, one of them will lead on the parish council agenda, as an example, and one on external funding, etc. So there'll be some additional sort of geographical capacity, but also some specialist support as well to drive forward some of the areas within the policy work. So I think that's all I want to say at this stage. Clearly, there is the Appendix 1 that has the details, and we can pick up questions around that as members see fit. But I'll just pass to Karen whether she wishes to elaborate on anything in particular. Thank you.
Good afternoon, councillors. I'm not sure whether you can hear me because my computer is still playing up. So if somebody could just say whether they can hear me or not, that'd be great.
Loud and clear, Karen. Loud and clear.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't really have much to add, having given sort of an update to Chris to write the paper. I suppose the only other one perhaps to mention is around external funding for community groups, which I know as members you all receive as well. So we do still send that out on a regular basis with the additions that go in. So it went out this morning with 4 new funding streams, both internal and external. So that's been very helpful. We initially started it for COVID support, but we have continued that because community groups, members and MPs have said it's very useful and they like to pass it on. But no, I don't think at this stage I've got anything to add. I'm sure there'll be detail in some of the questions that are asked. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you both very much. I'm unusually for me, I'm going to abuse my chair's privileges, and I've just got 2 very quick questions before I bring all the members in. Firstly, will the committee be able to see a copy of that Star Chamber report, even if it's on a private agenda? We'd like to be able to see that and see how each department is progressing. And the second one is, are we asking wards for an annual update on not a judgment update, but just an annual update on what's been achieved against their ward plan?
So if I pick up the first one, which is the answer straightforward, yes. I think that's all part of the learning from this process. Again, Karen will know the detail, but my understanding is that we're seeking to refresh the ward plans on a regular basis, and I'm sure some of that includes progress against them. But Karen?
Absolutely. So on an annual basis, ward plans are asked to be updated and so we can keep them on file. But actually, I think that's a very good idea that we make it a bit more specific and perhaps just a very quick report back on achievements. So I will take that away, Councillor. And then just the other one on the localisation Star Chamber. My understanding is you have received a report on phase 1.
Oh, if we have, that's my apologies. Is that right, Jane?
I'm only aware that members have received the original template information that was sent out to directorates. I'm not sure we've seen anything.
Okay, so certainly I received it today because from our colleagues in policy and strategy, and I had thought it had been circulated, but there is something, so we can circulate it straight away.
Right. And
phase 1, yeah.
And also forgive us if it's only arrived today, we may not have got to it in our emails.
Yeah.
So do forgive us. That's brilliant. And also I think one of the key things about getting ward report updates is less of a judgment of what have you done, more of an understanding of what the blockages are. So it's a two-way street, isn't it? You know, we've managed to achieve this with such and such community support, but we found this particular issue difficult, and that then gives us an opportunity to offer support to those wards.
Absolutely, and it'd be useful for the Star Chamber as well.
Okay, brilliant. In which case I will be quiet and allow other members to have an opinion. Councillor Bridles first.
Yeah, agree with what you've just said, Councillor Holbrook. I think that's a good idea because it would enable there to be some feedback from members about, as you say, some of the blockages and challenges, which will help us to learn and move forward with all of this. I'm encouraged that it seems that we are moving forward, so that's great. I've got a few points to ask. First of all, we used to have this driver group because you do need to really drive this agenda, as we all know, otherwise it just doesn't happen. And there used to be this cross-party group of people, councillors, who used to come together. Is there any intention to bring that together again with senior, really kind of higher officers attending it? I mean, obviously not too often, but I just think cross-party is important. That was first point. Second point, on the second page of the report, I think it's really good that you're considering doing a neighbourhood planning toolkit. So that sounds like a good idea, because I know Councillor Hunt in Perry Bar has struggled with doing a neighbourhood plan, which is obviously like a planning sort of thing about use of land. But I do think, I would make the point that I think we need an officer in our planning department to kind of promote the idea of councillors and residents doing neighbourhood plans if that's what they think will help them. So could we have an officer who's sort of dealing with that and promoting it? Because planning department have been a bit, I would say, well, they haven't exactly championed it, let's put it that way. There were some problems, I know, in the original at the start. Thirdly, could we hear, Karen, at some point, how the new, which is, it's great that you've got new staff, how are all the team now going to be deployed across our wards? Because I'm unclear, and I'm a pioneer place, about exactly who my ward's going to be relating to in the future. So I think it'd be good to have that spelled out a bit. Next point was you said in, these aren't marked, so I can't refer to them, but in Appendix 1, you were talking about updating ward information. So what exactly do we mean by that? But I think that would be useful, because stuff that we had about our demographics in the ward are bound to have changed. And do you mean that all that is going to be updated so that we can have that to have a look at to help us with our ward plans? My next point was, this is really important for Councillor Hussain. We have had some of the top dogs, in inverted commas, so, you know, the directors coming to our committee, what have we had them coming to? Was it Councillor Holbrook? Have we had them coming here? I can't remember now. Yes, no, Pioneer Places, that's what it was, yeah. But I would say that even though a couple of those directors have come along, so Darren Sher, Ian McLeod, for example, those are the two, they're still not enacting what we want. So for example, property services, which is under Ian MacLeod, I think, are still not letting us know what's happening locally in our wards as a matter of course, so that, you know, we have to get to find out, say, through a resident saying what hell's going on here. So I just think, and property services council who's saying, when you look at my challenge case study from Pioneer Place, you'll see that there has been problems with that particular section. And I think Darren Share as well said that he'd do some follow-up on grounds maintenance issues, but that hasn't happened. So, you know, it's good that the directors are coming, but they've got to then follow it through. So that was that. The next one was just about, I noticed it said additional NDSU £102,000 resource to set up new small grant scheme in Q2-3. So does that mean we're going to get like a little ward pot? I wondered what the answer was to that one. Next one was the ward plans. It says 100,000 available for Cabinet to invest in projects from ward plans. How's that going to work, and how are we going to access that money? And the NDSU team, there's going to be somebody who's going to be able to help with helping residents to fundraise on a particular project, say that you're spearheading in the ward plan. Who is that person going to be? Is it going to be one person? And will we all get to know as councillors who that person is? And, you know, I think we kind of need an update on all this, really, which is good that it's happening, but we need to know about it. And then just in relation to, there was a ward data working group, which I was on and Karen McCarthy was on, and we gave all our ideas for what could be in a ward data pack for us that would be in addition to all the demographic stuff that we have. And I don't know what's happened to that. You know, you kind of take part in something and then it sort of grinds to a halt and nobody tells you that it's got buried somewhere. So again, does anybody know where that's got to? And is it going to come to a conclusion so that all the work that we've put in is going to be worth it? That's it, Councillor Holbrook and Councillor Hussain. Hope that's all right. Thank you.
That's fine. I'm going to leave it to the team to decide how they want to divide the questions. Some of them were policy questions. Some of them are officer and technical questions. So I'll probably, if it's okay with Councillor Shabrana, ask Chris to lead off and then direct questions as you see fit. If that's okay.
That's fine. That's fine. And
thank you.
And Karen, you know, jump in when I start saying things that aren't right.
Yeah, I have written down some things, so yeah.
So, you know, I think the cross-party working group had at the time had sort of served its purpose. It had run out of steam, and I guess it's now another political conversation as to if that needs to be re-established and what would it consider. Fully accept the cross-party approach is really helpful around localisation. So I think that's one for us to pick up with the cabinet member. Obviously, we're waiting for the confirmation, hopefully, around the neighbourhood planning bid. Again, it's a bit, Karen will just need to correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is some officer time has been built into that in terms of that process, and it's not just a toolkit, it's actually some support as well. And equally, I think, we heard about going back to when, gosh, I don't know when it would have been, 2019, something like that, about some of the criticisms around neighbourhood planning. And I think the support that's been available through inclusive growth has got a little better over that time, in that there are named officers who are supporting those parts of the city that are going through a neighbourhood planning process. But absolutely, I recall that being referenced 2 or 3 years ago when we were looking at the policy side of things. Again, Karen can pick up on the detail of the geographical areas for the 6 officers, and I'm sure she'd be happy to send something out as to where they're being deployed in terms of the geography around that. The ward data piece that you mentioned, and then came back to the ward data working group, that sits with the policy team and with Varun, but you're right, some work has been undertaken around, well, what data sets are available, what can we pull out of the systems and then provide towards. And I think we're waiting on that final report to come back to say exactly what that can look like. But certainly that is a piece of work that the policy team have been looking at. I'm not sure how we hold people to account for things within the pioneer places. I guess it's inviting them back to the pioneer places or picking up through the Star Chamber process. If we know that there were, some things that were mentioned in the pioneer places meeting that directorates were going to go away and deliver, and they haven't progressed, then the Star Chamber would seem to be the appropriate place to try and make sure that those are progressing. I'm going to leave the 102 grants process apart and let Karen pick that up, apart from to say that was effectively a managed underspend from last year, or some income that was brought in, and therefore it's a one-off pot of money. Certainly the original thinking was that would be around capacity building, building the strengths of groups within wards to utilise that as grant funding. But again, that's something that we'd need to take that back through the cabinet member for decision. And that's equally with the 100,000 that is available for cabinet to put into ward plans. And that came about as a result of, some of the things we've heard again over a number of years about how there is limited progress that is achieved on some of the actions in the ward plans. And so it was how do we find a way to get cabinet to link their priorities through to the ward plan priorities and find a way to fund some of that. So I know that Karen has done a piece of work that has looked at all the ward plans and has pulled out the actions and priorities in the ward plans and themed them via cabinet portfolio to try and identify where they fall within cabinet members' priorities. And I think the final one was external funding, but I can't remember the specific question. So at that point, I'll hand over to Karen, who will pick up on any I've missed and no doubt correct me on things or add some detail.
Thanks, Chris. Yes, I'll do them in the same order because I did write them down. So with neighbourhood planning, I think it was Councillor Bridle asked the initial question. So there is now a working group which has been set up, which is across directorates. So it's the Neighbourhood Development Support Unit and neighbourhood planners, and that's been really useful in terms of just learning and sharing different approaches and that essence of importance of neighbourhood working, and that's been really fruitful. That's where the shared bid went into central government, and yes, even if we do or if we don't get that grant, and hopefully we will, the work will still be done, and they have assigned somebody very specific to do an update on the general information that is more user friendly on neighbourhood planning. They're doing that at the moment, and also named officers for particular geographic places. In terms of staff deployed, the new staff have been in post 2 weeks, so forgive me, I have given them 2 weeks grace in terms of for their induction and getting used to everything that they need to know and what they're picking up. And the information on who's covering what and which ward and the update on relationship managers will go out next week. So you will know, but I've just given a bit of breathing space to enable them to do a bit of forward reading, forward planning, getting to know their areas, but that will go out very shortly. In terms of the ward data pack, absolutely, Chris, I've got nothing to add. That it is Varun and Naomi, but we will chase that because yes, we do need to get that information back. In terms of the ward plan process, we are currently reviewing that, ready for the next cycle. So obviously from 2022 to 26, and whether there is a an easier way, more effective way of including the information, making it a bit more specific. So that will be, that's been done and undertaken at the moment. And obviously when that's ready, we will do that cycle of member information sessions and sending the emails out with it. So that is being done. The Pioneer Places and the what we call Speak Truth to Power sessions. Yes, I mentioned this yesterday. It was our first meeting get together back from the summer, and actually did go through the actions that had been pulled out, and I will be going back and reminding on all of them. Councillor Bridle, as I mentioned yesterday, I will be doing that because things move on, we all get busy again, and it does appear that some of them haven't been done. But also, I think it would be really useful to have those in the stage 2 of the localisation star chamber, which is actually picking up on deep dive of things that have been done and haven't been done. So that is being progressed. The NDSU Small Grants Fund, the 102,000, this is income that the team have earned, mainly through management fees, hard earned, and we wanted to put them back into a small grants fund around COVID recovery and capacity building, waiting for our new staff to arrive, but that will be hopefully ready to go for quarter 3. In terms of external funding, that is one of the leads, one of the thematic leads NDSU member will have, although each geographic lead will also be able to support that. And obviously we do send the external funding out as well on a regular basis. So I think that's covered all the points. My apologies if I've missed any of them.
No, that's absolutely fine, and thank you both. Was there anything further, Councillor Bridle?
Well, I think I better stop for now. That was very helpful. Thank you. You've answered most of it. Yeah, thanks very much. I'll leave it for now. Thanks, Councillor Holbrook.
Okay, no problem at all. Councillor Wood.
Oops. Yeah, thanks, Chair. Couple of things. One is I wholeheartedly endorse Councillor Bridle's frustrations with trying to get feedback from officers when commitments have been made, and the only way we get them is by chasing for them, and that certainly shouldn't be the case. I also welcome, I suppose, a bit of an update on what's going to happen with ward plans, because as members of this committee will remember, we've had quite a few discussions where really it's been felt that ward plans are things that we submit and nothing happens. So we seem to have a process that produces lots of paper but no actions from them. So I would certainly welcome some increased input from officers on the ward plans, because at the moment I don't really see much value in them, apart from ticking boxes, because nothing ever seems to come back out of them. A couple of specifics, and I'm sure Chris will cringe when he hears this one. My old soapbox one. It's great that the city are carrying out these discussions about establishing parish councils, etc. elsewhere. It can't even handle the 2 that it's got. And one of the items on your list about the stuff that's supposed to be transferring to Sutton Coldfield Town Council, it takes months. Actually, it takes years. If I had to wait as long to buy a house as it's taken the City Council to carry out some of the simplest of tasks, like the transfer of approximately, 400 square feet of land, I dread to think what my legal fees would be. So I really do think that before we try and encourage other parts of the city to go down this route, we sort out the route that we've got first, or the problems that we got first, because there are clearly issues there. Time and time again, I've got to chase for feedback on things, because the town council aren't getting responses. I'm not even getting responses. And it's almost like, yeah, it's manana. So I really do think we need to sort out how we deal with parish councils and town councils before we bring even more on board who will just suffer the same level of frustration. So that was really all I wanted to highlight.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to lead off, Chris, and bring in whoever you feel appropriate?
Yeah, no, that's fine. So I guess ward plans, you know, it clearly is a joint endeavour around how some of the actions in the ward plans are delivered. It's certainly not the responsibility of officers just to receive a ward plan and get on with it all. So it's about how are some of those plans and priorities produced in the first place? How are we involving, you know, local partners in trying to deliver some of those things? So some of it is in how are those priorities and some of the actions that flow from it, you know, set realistically so that they can progress. So, you know, I accept, you know, because we've heard it, that there are issues with delivering upon the ward plans. I'm not trying to shy away from that, but there's this sort of joint ownership around how do we go about doing that. You know, there will be within Karen's team, there'll be someone who will, you know, look quite closely at ward plans, look at the relationship managers piece as well, how we might maximise that. So, you know, again, I'm hopeful we'll make some progress around the support that can be wrapped around some of those. In terms of parish councils, again, you know, I think there are certainly some very valid criticisms around the timescale. Some land transfers have happened, whether that be allotments, whether it be, you know, VZ Gardens, etc. But I wouldn't also want to ignore there has also been some really positive work done with the parish councils as well. You know, at Sutton, you know, the work that we did around the library in the first place, the work that we've done more recently around the I can't remember whether they're called town rangers in the end or not, you know. So I think there are positives as well in terms of those working relationships, as well as the fact that some of the things do take longer to deliver than either party would want. That probably picks up on the two.
Okay. Is there anything you want to come back with, Councillor Wood?
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Chris, for at least acknowledging that there are still issues there. I think it is very much a case of educating both systems, and I suppose it's managing expectations as well. But there really does need to be an appreciation that things need to move rather than grind to a halt in certain areas. And certainly, if an elected member asks for feedback or updates, it shouldn't take 3 or 4 emails to actually get something back. And I think that's the thing that officers need to take on board, Chris. And that isn't directed at you, by the way.
I'm sure there's 1 or 2 emails that take me a long time to respond to, but no, I think I accept that. And it's interesting because some of those areas that we're talking about in relation to Sutton are with officers who are, in my view, are officers that are absolutely on board with a localization agenda. So it's not as if, you know, there are officers that sometimes are not so keen on these things and all the rest of it. So it's not a, you know, it's not a lack of willingness. It's whatever the issues are, capacity in wherever that may sit. But I just make that point because I think that's equally important, because I think that sometimes there are 2 things that sort of prevent progress, and, you know, and that can sometimes be, you know, willingness to progress some of these things, but it's certainly not the case on those particular issues.
I think forgive me, Ken. I think what we're really saying is that members understand that it's joint ownership, and we understand that along with our local partners, we can move some of that forward. Not all of our plans are council based.
Yeah.
But even if there is a blockage, if there's a willingness and there's a problem further up the chain, if we at least know about it, we can then step in and try and relieve that at a higher level. But if we're not getting the feedback about what the problem is, we've then got no leverage. I think that's what you were trying. Is that what Is that what you were getting at, Ken?
Yeah, and I think that is it. That is the case. Yeah, because what we don't want to end up doing as members is sort of keep booting the email further up the chain, and at the end, we end up demanding a meeting with the chief exec or with the leader of the council to try and get something done. It should never ever get to that stage.
And we're not, we're not scaredy cats. We're quite prepared to stand in front of a room full of people and say, there's a reason this can't happen right now, and this is what it is. We will happily do that, but we need the information before we can be prepared to do that.
Exactly.
And I think that's where the blockage is, I think.
Yeah.
If there's nothing else, Ken, I'm going to move on.
No, that's fine. Okay. Thanks, Penny.
Councillor Alden.
Thank you, Chair. I want to say something about these neighbourhood plans, which, to my utter amazement, according to this report, there's still 17 wards that haven't done a neighbourhood plan. And I find it unbelievable that now officers are talking about the next cycle of plans, but they haven't actually got in all the ones from the last cycle. So surely the priority ought to be to make sure we get in, if that's what the council wants, a neighbourhood plan for every ward, there should be one. And coupled with that, we've got these pioneer places. Now, maybe in the past we've been told what these places are. I can't remember. I can't find it in these papers today. It would seem to me sensible that if you've got pioneer places which are clearly getting some extra support, that ought to be the places where they haven't yet come up with a plan and they're clearly in need of some support. I suspect it's not the same places because Councillor Bridle said that she was a pioneer place, her ward, and I don't expect she's one of the ones that hasn't done a neighbourhood plan for a minute. So how were these pioneer places chosen? Why are they not going to what appears to be the wards which need most help? Are we going to be told, can we be told what they are? As I say, maybe we were in the past, but I can't remember what they are. I would like another list. And just to go back to the neighbourhood plans again, so Karen said about the looking at doing the cycle for the neighbourhood plans for the next cycle. But I think it's really important that not too much work is done on that before the elections, because they are all out elections. There are bound to be some changes of councillor. Some might be change of political party, some might be just be a change of councillor within the same political party, but they're going to be some new people. And I don't think it's fair to have done too much work for them when you're going to have new people coming in who want to be leading it in their wards. So surely instead of concentrating on the next cycle, we should be going back and finding out why 15 wards haven't got a neighbourhood plan and doing something about it. Thank you.
To be honest, I totally agree with that, Councillor Alden. What we tend to do in my part of the world is our planning process starts from June. So if there is a change of councillor or if there is a change of, political party, what happens is you hand over what you've got. It's the next person has then got the opportunity to, amend, rejig, do whatever. And that's regardless of political party. I think it's only reasonable. And I suspect you do the same, which is our planning process June to June. So I do take that point on board. I think that's a very important one. Who wants to comment first?
I will. So absolutely correct. No, what I was explaining is we're doing the pre-planning ready for next year. That the work with members won't be until the new cycle. So it'll be post-election. So it'll be doing that in June. But we're putting together and listening to comments that people have made about the current process. So my apologies if that was confusing, but we wouldn't start working with it and talking to members until they were the newer members for the next cycle. So these are the second one is just their ward plans. The neighbourhood plans are something different. Neighbourhood plans are if you like, they come from central government. Neighbourhood plans are where you get you have to have a ballot where you where communities can choose their area, and it allows them a little more say on spatial planning and a little bit more SIL. So they are different. They're not our cycle of ward plans. They are much more extensive and actually have to be approved by ballot. In terms, yes, there are still some plans missing. I am open to any suggestions for encouraging them to come in. Both cabinet members have been made fully aware of the plans that are coming in. These plans are owned by the ward member, the ward stakeholders, and need to go through a ward meeting to actually be known and ratified. So we are working really hard and still progressing that. I'm currently talking to Councillor Hussain on that. But yes, there is an issue with we don't have a complete set of plans.
Sorry, Karen, can I interrupt you? Because I want scrutiny to be a safe place where both officers can share their challenges and members can share theirs as well. I'm not going to ask you to name the wards because that would be unfair. Do you get a sense of why those wards are struggling to deliver those plans?
Yes, I would be more than happy to name them, but yeah, there is a very strong correlation between those wards who are not having regular ward meetings, not just this year but last year, and those who haven't done a ward plan.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just going to, and do forgive me for interrupting you. I'm just going to ask the committee a question now that doesn't require an officer response. How would members feel if we liaised with our own chief whips about those wards that have still got issues, and what those issues might be, and whether there's any additional support we can put into those wards?
Can I ask something, Penny?
And can I make a point on that?
I'm going to go Councillor Alden, and then Councillor Bridle, and then Councillor Locke.
Thank you.
Could I just ask, Karen, as I said, you said we won't name the wards, that's fine. But is it a case that people are struggling to do a plan, or that people have said, we're not doing one, we don't want to do one, we're not doing one? Because there's a difference, isn't there, between those two things?
Yes.
So
do you have a sense of that, Karen? And you can be honest if you feel you can.
I would say the majority are not that they don't want to do. It's that strong proactive. We're not doing one. It's other reasons why they haven't been done, and there hasn't been a dialogue. A responsive dialogue to emails.
Okay, I don't want to put you in a difficult position as an officer, Karen, which was why I said very specifically it was a member discussion, because I do think there might be something we can do to help here. Councillor Bridle.
Yes, agree with what you're saying, but I think it's about, well, I'd say at the start anyway, it's about help. And I forgot to ask, because I seem to remember in the stuff that we've had through committee that there was a reference to member development. I mean, we've kind of all made our points about officers in the council, but I do think as well, we councillors need to also develop our localised approaches. And I think some people maybe just don't, I mean, they should do really if they're a councillor, get it. But I mean, there are some councillors who we probably all know, I mean, who just don't work enough locally and do stuff with local residents who they're representing. I mean, we've got to be straight about it, haven't we? And I'd just say that as councillor to councillor. So I think with the member development programme, whatever that is, for goodness sake, let's not just have officers talking to members. Let's have us as members, talking with other members about how we've done it and just giving people ideas and trying to encourage them in the same way we're trying to encourage officers who don't get it. That's what I'd say.
But I do think, because I'm sure nobody wants to embarrass their colleagues, and I'm quite sure that it's members across the political spectrum. This is not trying to score political points. I'm quite sure it's members from every party. But I do think maybe our chief whips could help with that, and then potentially within our groups, pair them up with somebody that's quite successful at it and has done it well, which is that first offer of help, but also that slight element of discipline that comes within our own political structures. That's just my view. I'll take Mary, and then I'll take Ken Wood. And I'd also, if Councillor Harmer's still with us, I'd like an opinion from him as well.
Right, thank you, Chair. On the point you made about Chief Whip, I know our Chief Whip, I'm Assistant Whip for our group. I has been doing some work on ward plans and for those wards that haven't completed them. So I will, if you want me, or if you want to have a word with him also about it, and you know, see what can be done further.
Okay, thank you for that, Mary. I suspect whatever we conclude, what we should do formally as a committee to every chief whip at the same time, so that it's not then left on any one member, because obviously scrutiny is independent. But I really appreciate that offer. Councillor Wood.
Yes, thanks again. Yeah, I think if we're going to do something like that, yeah, the chief whips are the way to do it. I think the ones potentially, and I'll hold my hands up to this one because I was probably one of the last ones to put in a ward plan, is that, yeah, we've still got to get across to members what they can get out of it or what the advantage is. I think there's still a lot of people out there that potentially don't see the benefit. Okay, there's now the vast majority of people have now submitted ward plans. I would still say it's questionable as to the reasoning why they have done it, and do they actually fully understand what they're going to get out of it? And that's where the help from officers is got to come from. We all specialise in our own portfolios, if you like, in our own scrutiny things, and our colleagues are also well stretched in the scrutinies that they're involved in, and they will be up to speed with the things that they're discussing. So I think that there's got to be that element of assistance. And by the way, do you realise if you do this, you will get this? So that assistance is got to be there. The other thing that we got to bear in mind is that a lot of our colleagues, and again, this will include the ones that took ages to get the ward plans in, we have jobs.
Yes.
You know, Mr. Kersley went out of his way to say that there was too many officers acting as councillors and too many councillors acting as officers. Well, yeah, there's a limit to the amount of time that a lot of our colleagues can put in because they've got daytime jobs. So the more assistance and the more legible help that we can get from officers, to encourage people to do these things, the better. And obviously, the easier they are to do, the better as well.
Yes, I totally understand that. Finally, I'm going to go to Councillor Harmer, and then I think I'm going to make a suggestion.
Thank you, Penny. I put a question actually in the chat, which was, is it more 1 or 2 member wards? Now, Karen said, well, it's both, but that sort of wasn't really my question. My question was whether there was a preponderance of, well, I guess I was guessing that there might be a preponderance of 1 member wards. But, and that sort of ties in with Ken's point about, you know, if you've got a one, well, he developed it that far, but if you've got a 1 member ward where that 1 member works or has, you know, maybe a cabinet responsibility or whatever, you know, you are under huge stress, and you know, I do wonder whether while this is going slightly off the beaten track here, you know, we ought to, within the localisation agenda, we ought to look at the impact the sort of current ward structure has on how we drive it forward, because we sort of take it as a given that it has caused huge disruption it makes it impossible, for example, to have ward committees where you have one member wards, because you can't have a committee of one person. And we have currently in the situation, I think the first time that I've ever been on the council, we have residents in the city without any councillor. So any resident of Yardley East does not have a councillor. In the past, if a councillor very sadly passed away, there were 2 other members of that ward who could pick up the work. And now, okay, yes, surrounding councillors are picking up the work, but those residents are currently underrepresented. I think it's totally unacceptable. To have a situation that allows that to happen. So I would just bring it back more to the point. And Councillor Neil Eustace was actually one like this, who was incredibly cynical about the value of the plan, because he would say, well, it's just more form filling. He might put it slightly more bluntly. And it'll just gather dust on a shelf somewhere, and someone's ticked a box, and then nothing happens. That would be his view. I think actually he did do it in the end under pressure. Maybe Karen can comment on that. But it's about, I suspect there won't be necessarily total correlation between less active councillors, because Neil was one of the most active councillors in the city, but was very cynical about the value of it. And there may be others who are very active and would rather spend an afternoon out talking to residents and filling in a ward plan. Sorry?
There's also a reality about this, which is, while I totally understand that, and I totally understand the pressure on one-member wards is higher. My personal view is I would never have gone for less than 3-member wards, but we're not going to fix that here today.
No. I accept that. I'm just, I was just drifting off that, because I do think that those things are related to it. But more specifically, in terms of answer to your question, I think it is probably both a mix of those councillors who are much less active, combined with those who are very active and actually don't see the point in it, and therefore it's quite difficult probably to separate out the two.
But we have there's a reality of opportunity here. There will always be extenuating circumstances. There'll be a handful of councillors that have got extenuating circumstances, as in they work, that ward may not any longer be represented whilst we're waiting for the next set of elections, things like that. But I do think that as scrutiny, we should take some responsibility for encouraging members as much as we do officers. And if the committee's in agreement, I would suggest that I ask Karen to give me a list, and then I will communicate directly with each chief whip, and just ask them to identify what the problem is, and then we can send that back to Karen, and then we can wrap the support around that member that needs to make that happen, or members. That would be my suggestion. Does anybody have an objection to that?
I agree.
No, I'll go. Yeah.
Okay, that's what we'll do then. I'll do it privately as the chair, and at the next meeting, when the meeting closes, I'll give you an update on where we are. I'm just not big into public shaming, because we don't know each individual councillor's circumstance. But I will take that on as a role of chair. So leave that one with me. Right. Is that going to be helpful for you, Karen?
Yes, that would be great, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Right, moving on. Is there anything else we wanted to ask on localisation? I can see Ken still has got his hand up. Is that a comeback, or is that a legacy?
Yeah, my apologies, Chair. I'll drop behind.
All right.
There you go.
I'll let you off just this once, Ken. I only changed the meeting just to accommodate you, so I'll let you off just this once. Okay, so on that basis, then we'll schedule the next localisation update. I'm going to let Councillor Shabrana Hussain make the last comments on localisation, which will obviously be more policy based. than the individual officer concerns we've had.
Thank you, Chair. I've listened to everything you've all got to say, which is brilliant. Thank you, Chair, for getting in touch with the outstanding wards, and that would be a great help. I've listened to all your comments. There is some work that I've got to do and have a chat with Karen and Chris, and hopefully we can move forward. I don't think we didn't really talk much about the Commonwealth Games. Obviously the funds were in stage 2 now. Some of the wards will be having their meetings. They've already had their meetings. I would like some feedback to see how it's gone, because most wards have got external who are facilitating the meeting. So I would like some comments, how it went. Was it good or was it not right? Whatever your feedback is. So I would like some of the feedback on that. So, and we've still got a bit more work to do. So it'll be nice to know we're in the right direction. So thank you, and thank you, committee.
Okay, thank you so much for your time. We're going to move on to the last formal bits of the meeting. So Debrana and officers, you're very welcome to leave us. I'm sure you've got many of the things that you need to do, but equally you're very welcome to stay. But thank you all for your time. I thought it was very productive, and hopefully at least listening to the localisation update has been helpful in terms of how we move it forward. So thank you all very much for your time. Okay, so we will move on to item 7, which is the work programme. Has anybody got any? We've had to jig things around a little bit, I won't lie. Has anybody got any comments on the work programme? I'm going to do my job properly and actually turn my camera on now. We're having a proper bit. Has anybody got any comments on the work programme?
No.
Councillor Bridle?
I'm not. How are we doing this litter discussion? Is that going to be a separate get together?
No. So as soon as I can get through these next few bits, we're going to have a very quick reference meeting just to set out what we want to look at, and then we'll pull together, like we did with fly tipping. We'll pull together a series of informal evidence gathering, both from residents, lead councils, etc., and then we'll pull together a report, and then we'll take it back into scrutiny formally.
Okay,
if that's okay.
Yeah. Can I just say one thing on the performance stuff? When we had the lambs discussion,
yes.
Which James
yeah, thank you for stepping in there, by the way. I was
having
having technology problems.
That's fine. We said that it would be useful to have some performance information about street cleaning across the city by ward. Okay. So could we sort of make sure that happens? Because I think we've got performance coming to one of these sessions, haven't we? It's on our forward plan. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I'll ask Jane and Kerry to pick that up and make sure that comes forward as part of the work programme. Thanks. Councillor Wood.
Yeah, thanks. Just a quickie on the intended visit to voids and having a look at some voids. Can we ask officers to try and get some dates in the diaries for doing that?
So I'm very glad you said that, because I actually forgot, Councillor Wood. Contrary to popular belief, I'm not perfect. What we were going to, I've got 2 suggestions, depending on how people feel. We can either do it as a formal visit where we all meet and we all go together and we have a look round. And the idea is to get those in the diary before the next meeting, or depending on how worried people are about shielding and COVID, I can ask the officers to make 2 properties available. One as we get it, one as we're ready to hand it over, for a 3-hour period, and members can pop in that 3-hour period. What would members prefer?
I think the second one's quite a good suggestion, actually, Penny. That would keep everybody safe and at a distance.
Okay, that's absolutely fine. What I'll do is I'll get some. I say what Jane will do is Jane will get some dates from officers for those 3 hours. And if you could just let Jane know what time you want to go during those 3 hours, what we'll try and do is keep it to 2 members at a time, if at all possible, just so that everybody feels a little bit safer, if that's okay.
Yeah.
And what we'll do is we'll have both properties on the same day, or like one day and the next day. But we'll come back to you with that. But I thought that might be a safer way of doing it.
Can also make a request that the one that we go to see before it's let is not what I used to call a high cost void. What I'd like to one where we've had to go in and do an awful lot of work to. I mean, by all means, we can see one of those as an example of the extremes of how some of our houses get handed over. But what I'd like to see is a more run-of-the-mill void that we expect a tenant to accept when we show them it.
So what I was going to ask for is 2 average properties. So one in the state that we would get it, one in the state that we would hand it over, but in the middle of the field, because we all know there are properties that have been absolutely trashed. It cost us a huge amount. Sorry, I'm trying to read the chat at the same time. Mary, did you want to know where? Mary, were you asking where? No? Okay. But yeah, we'll sort them out. I can't guarantee where they'll be. I'll try and do one north of the city and one south of the city. That's probably the best I can do.
No, that's fine.
And we'll kind of take it from there if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Was there anybody else on work programme? No? Okay. So date of the next meeting will be the 14th of October. That should be a formal meeting. We should all be safe and okay by then, but who knows? But I don't want to do 2 informal meetings in a row, so I'm going to try and make that formal, dependent on what guidance at that point is. Requests for calling, we can't take those, unfortunately, because this is a formal an informal meeting. I can take any other urgent business. No? Okay. And the authority, we can't take because it's an informal meeting. So you're stuck with me and the officers for the next month at least. So that's the end of that. Is there anything else anybody wants to say before we end this session and move on to an informal one? No? Okay, lovely. Well, thank you everybody who attended today's informal meeting. I believe, I'm going to check with Jane and Kerry. I believe the intention is we'll just come off live stream and then stay in this meeting for the litter bin discussion. Is that right? Yes. Okay. So if we can end the live stream, and thank you everybody very much.